short on time, so we're going to talk fast and get through the content. So let's start off with Traci with a very quick, what is your role with AI? Name, rank, and serial number.
Name, rank, serial number. Okay. Well, I work in our Center of Excellence for Data and Analytics and AI, and I lead our global artificial intelligence platform. Name, rank, serial.
There we go. And then moving down, Ganesh.
I work every day, work really hard to actually make data ready for AI. Because as we heard from two of the big challenges, one is talent and the ability to actually take things at scale in enterprises. The second biggest one is AI. So I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Molecula, a company I co-founded. Before that have been in AI for a long time, was with Cognitive Scale, and we used applied machine learning to business problems. And before that, I was at Dell running AI and big data work before.
Thank you. And Martin Sokalski, your role with AI specifically.
So I lead our global team in emerging technology risk, and we're helping our clients with responsible adoption of AI. We believe that one of the main foundational challenges of this lack of scale of AI is around trust and transparency. Yep. So we try to solve for that and drive responsible adoption with trust and transparency at its foundation.
Thank you. Last but not least, Vinodh.
I work with Traci in our Lighthouse Center of Excellence and really focusing on enabling our businesses to adopt AI at scale. And also trying to get AI out of the realm of just the data scientists into the broader consultant developer community inside of KPMG as well.
Okay. So let's get a bit of perspective. Maybe we start with you, Martin. What is the whole point in doing AI? Are you just following what everybody else is doing, or?
So there's a lot of interesting discussion around kind of use cases, right? So I would say most of the discussion that's out there is about the what of AI. What are the use cases? What are the opportunities? How can we use AI to differentiate ourselves? But we're having more and more discussion around the how, right? So how do we actually govern, enable, and tool the organization, the enterprise, to scale and drive AI solutions? So the purpose is to really kind of gain differentiated advantage to achieve the art of the possible while actually doing that with the proper kind of foundation, transparency and trust and governance behind it.
Okay. All right. So talk about the point of AI. What about where this should sit? So Traci, when you look at building out AI teams and an AI strategy, should the agenda sit in this CIO's realm, where we've been hearing so much push from the IT audience, or does it need to sit somewhere else?
So this is an interesting question, because no matter how I answer it, I might offend someone. But the reality is that AI needs to be pervasive everywhere, and so trying to silo it in any one particular division of the C-suite, I think, is a mistake. There's a significant role in the office of the CIO for artificial intelligence, but there's an equally important one in the Chief Strategy Office and in the CFO office. If you're bucketing it into just a CIO, then it becomes just a technology. It just becomes individual technology projects. It will never be pervasive across the organization. It has to be an entire C-suite endeavor for it to be successful.
Okay.
If I may just add to that, right? I mean, I like to say this, with $13 trillion at stake in GDP improvement with AI is far too important and impactful to be left just to technologists, right? So, and I think we've seen that over and over. I think you mentioned that too. How do you take it from the realm of machine learning engineers to consultants and business learning? So.
Okay, then how can we get more people on the business side of the house thinking more about learning technology, especially low-code technologies, taking it upon themselves to develop their skills and capabilities? Because I'm seeing too many companies push this down to the lower middle management layers, putting it into projects. We'll be talking about this more tomorrow as well. But Vinodh, when you look at how do you get more of a COE type setup, what is working, what isn't, in your opinion, getting more senior people engaged?
I think a a big part of the effort needs to be, and we've done a lot within KPMG, and we're helping a lot of our clients do this as well, is to really demystify the technology around AI and kind of translate that into language that the average business leader can understand and internalize. Till that happens, this is going to remain just another geeky, experimental type of thing, right? So unless the C-suite, unless the line of business leader begins to internalize what this technology can do, or any technology can do, right, to transform their business, they're never going to, take the effort to really get underneath the covers. Even if you provide them the coolest low-code environment, you're not going to find the CFO essentially, trying to really get underneath the covers of, these kinds of technologies. So I think the key thing that we see integral to whether it's a COE or any kind of effort to kind of democratize these kinds of capabilities is to find that translational layer that allows the ultimate business user, right, to start to internalize in the context of either operations they run, services they provide, or customers they serve, right? That's going to be the key to making sure that they get their head around this. Otherwise, it's just great water cooler conversation, bar conversation, hey, I do AI, right? What about you?
I'll just maybe add to that. So I agree. I think right now we're seeing a lot of disjointed efforts, right? So the key is kind of how do we bring it all together, right? We have great technology capabilities, great cloud platforms, we have amazing models and AI algorithms that are available. We have very smart data scientists. We have very capable capabilities across the business, right? But how do we kind of bring it all together into an operating model or a governance model so it all makes sense? So you have a clear kind of vision for what the strategy may be, what the business outcomes will be, and that again, that will help drive that better adoption and scale.
Someone commented just yesterday that they worked in a manufacturing company when they started their career, and when a new machine was introduced into the company, there was a fight amongst the employees, for who would get trained on it first, right? Why isn't that happening with all of these emerging technologies? People seem to be almost wary of where this is all shifting. Ganesh?
That's a great question, and I wish it was like that, where you introduce a new technology and everybody just swarms in and try to get their hands on it. I think there is enough. One of the foundational building blocks is education, and education more than from just talking about like what AI is and stuff, but AI is actually causing the business and technology folks within the same enterprise to invent and reintroduce a new language, right? A new vocabulary, a new set of things, and it's more than just about knowing and swarming about this thing. Is that everybody has a role to play in this whole thing. And when I work with clients who have successfully deployed center of excellences for AI, there's three different elements that they actually look at. One is at a bare minimum, get their data foundation in place, make sure they have access to all the right data, all the data, and for the right use cases. Second is getting the talent and education democratized, more than just the machine learning engineers. How do you educate the business analysts? How do you, educate the CFO, understanding the capabilities around it? And then three, they actually develop a very successful new vocabulary to have that partnership between business and technology and IT. I think that's a consistent theme I've seen for folks who have really moved over the hump, and they're actually very successful deploying AI.
And I think of one other challenge that I think is important in this area, which is that the landscape of artificial intelligence technologies is so giant right now that it's really hard for organizations to pick the technologies that they want their employees to be literate on. And if you pick any one domain, even if you go out of AI and just look at visualization tools, any one organization is probably somewhere in the organization using Tableau and ClickView and Power BI. And so how do you choose where to place the investments on getting people literate? And that's just, those are three that are probably in every organization in this room today, somewhere in the departments, and that's just a visualization tool. When you start to think about the complexities of AI technologies and the number of different AI technologies that are being experimented with at departmental levels instead of at enterprise levels, it's completely overwhelming to try to figure out how to upscale the workforce.
They can't keep up. People can't keep up, right?
So Phil, I think we missed a really important lesson from the consumer side of AI when it comes to the enterprise, and I'm hoping the next 12 to 18 months we address that, right? When you think about how ubiquitous AI is in the consumer space, it's because none of us even realize we're using AI, right? I mean, how often do we talk about how cool Siri's AI is versus Alexa's AI, right? All we say is, look, this is cool experience that I have now, which I never had possible. And if you look at the enterprise, we're at the stage where we still got a bunch of geeks who build solutions on Jupyter notebooks that are talking about AI. We need to turn that around on its head and simply look at, here is the outcome we're looking to drive. This is one of the many capabilities that are available today. Don't talk to me about the technology, talk to me about the outcome, and go figure out how to go enable it. Steve Rainey mentioned the whole user experience that was one of the important learnings when he was taking his team through the whole AI enablement of tax services. Ultimately, it's that experience that buried all the technology deep underneath that, but delivered the transformational outcome, right? We see that on the consumer side. I think we're not there yet with the enterprise. We're still talking technology when we should be focusing on what can be enabled by this technology and how do we achieve that outcome.
Right. It sort of harks back to the days of ERP 20, 30 years ago, where the industry was controlled by 4 or 5 big software vendors. Now you've got hundreds of them, literally, we have some here, right? And it's like a democratization of technologies going on. Do you think this is going to continue to democratize, or this will consolidate back to a fewer number of providers over time? What's your view on that?
I think it's not going to consolidate anytime soon, right? Because the rate of diffusion of technology has increased so much that no one player, if you're betting all your eggs on one big basket, whoever the big player is, filling the blanks, and they're going to actually solve every problem you'll ever have in the enterprise, I think you're fooling yourself, right? I mean, that problem is never going to go away. I think we're past that whole mode of, I can build a company of a big size, we'll have one, I can dominate a market. People are smarter, organizations are smarter, we're more nimbler. So that problem is not going away. What it will do is actually, as the natural maturity curve of the technology goes through the maturation, you'll start seeing like everybody falling into different slots in the entire ecosystem, right? And there will be some natural leaders that will emerge. I mean, we don't try to duplicate search with any other search engine other than Google, right? So, or you don't try to duplicate a Power BI solution by building yet another Power BI solution. So there's a lot of this natural emergence that'll happen, but I think what it'll also do is the innovation is going to come from the smaller players, the newer thinkers as well, in addition to the large players, and it's going to be a giant mess for some foreseeable future, if you will.
I'll compare and contrast to the ERP era, since you brought it up, right? So part of the reason why you had, my hypothesis is that the reason why you had 4 or 5 players in the ERP era is these were the ones who could make the investment to fully document and understand the process and then build a monolithic application around it, SAP, so on and so forth. But if you look at what Peter was alluding to this morning, and what Steve was showing this morning on a slide with data being central, right, to this whole wave of innovation that's going on, have data, have ubiquitous technology, open source or from the cloud platform vendors, right, relatively inexpensive, have smart people, have a real business problem. You put the 4 together, and then you think about the microservices thinking that is going on, right? Highly componentized, niche, modularized capabilities that are being built. It is going to get democratized, and we need it to be democratized because we want millions of people with access to data sets, technology, rapidly spinning up these innovations so the enterprise can consume it. I think waiting for an SAP to show up in today's age to sort of fully document the end-to-end, I think that's not going to happen. I mean, there's just too much data, there's too much computing available, and there's lots of smart people out there with the secret ingredient, lots of capital out there, right, that's really fueling a lot of this innovation. So I don't think it's going to get consolidated. I actually think it's going to get more and more democratized.
Can I just add one thing there? What it also does is also frees up, like the natural specialists will emerge, right? But it frees up the thought cycles, the knowledge cycles, the talent cycles for businesses to do what they really came to do, right? You don't want to be a mortgage company trying to build your cloud infrastructure for the sake of running your mortgage business, right? That should already be available. So I think, well said in the way the evolution of the industry is.
Interesting. It sounds to me that we are just in the biggest governance challenge of all time that's facing organizations. And I see, Martin, you're nodding quite a lot as well here. How do you start to tackle this? What types of people do you need to lead this? Do companies have what it takes inside, or do they have to reach outside?
Yeah, so maybe we can start off by asking the question, why is governance even on the table, right? And the reason why governance is even on the table as a question, as an agenda item, is because there have been a number of high-profile events that really put organizations at risk. Reputational risk, financial risk, compliance risk. It's also on the table because the regulators are making their moves around AI. They haven't really specified prescriptive regulation around it yet, but they've provided guidance. They've continued laying the framework for regulation. So we know something is coming around that, right? They also see a lot of, organizations see a lot of their peers kind of end up in the wrong side of the story. And many of them also want to do the right thing. They want to have kind of proper control over the AI program. So from my perspective, there's really kind of 4 foundational challenges and pillars around AI, and I think governance will help solve for that. And that's around four things, right? So one being integrity. How do we get comfortable with the integrity of AI? 2 is around explainability, right? How can we explain what AI is actually doing? 3rd one is around fairness. Fairness is a very kind of, fairness and ethics, kind of very provocative statements, if you will, right? So that's a big kind of objective and a challenge for organizations to make sure that their AI is fair. And then 4th one is more around resilience. How do you make sure that your AI is resilient to adversarial attacks, to cyber attacks, and so on and so on? So kind of bringing it all together around those 4 pillars of trust, or let's call them imperatives of AI, is key. And it's not just kind of defining, at design, kind of fairness or bias and so on. It's really strategy through execution, through evolution, right? Making sure that those 4 trust imperatives exist as you define your AI strategy, as you build your models, as you deploy your AI, and as your AI continues to evolve. So we think shameless plug for a minute, but at KPMG we've developed this solution called AI in Control. And the whole idea is to really kind of embed those 4 pillars of trust throughout the life cycle of AI and provide proper monitoring for bias detection, for explainability, for fairness, so that if you need to engage the internal or external stakeholders, the business users, the regulators, and the public in general, there's a framework in place that you can use to explain for accountability, explainability, bias, and so on.
Thank you. So Traci, this kind of takes us on to this whole human side of the equation. I think you mentioned some of it earlier during your talk. But how do we deal with that in terms of fears of job displacement, fear of change? What do you find is preventing companies moving forward, and what's encouraging them?
Well, I'd like to address this with an example. I was working with a large organization's finance team, and they were implementing a lot of different types of automation, from RPA through different types of AI. And we started the conversation with them around, we should talk about workforce transition and the change management of implementing all of this automation within your organization. And the gentleman who was the sponsor for our project, who was a right hand to the CFO, he said, can I borrow your projector connector, the HDMI? I said, sure. So I handed it over to him, and he plugged it in. And he pulled up an Excel sheet. And the Excel sheet had 147 lines on it. And he said, do you know what this is? And I said, no. And he said, this is the backlog of all of the analysis, projects, and other tasks that I have that I want my team to be doing that they can't, because they're doing all of this. I love Steve Rainey's way of phrasing this. They're doing the soul-crushing work. So if you can help me bring X efficiency into my team, then I'm going to get to the next 20 items on this list. And then if you help bring me another X percentage of efficiency, I'm going to get to the next 30 on the list. And this list is never going to get smaller because there's always a new threat to us. There's always a new piece of research. There's always a new piece of analysis. There's always something else that I want my team to be pushing on. And I'm going to use automation to look at how do I free capacity in order for my team to do a lot more than they've ever done versus, cut a bunch of heads. Now, the reality is that some organizations are looking at the benefits of the broader landscape of automation along with AI as an effective tool to cut heads, to reduce their labor force, and that's a fact. And what you have to do in an organization, especially when that's part of your mandate, is you need to have those proper behavioral change management types of processes in place. You have to make it clear. You need to be transparent. You need to coach people. You need to help transition people. And you need to make sure that the organization knows that those types of programs are going to be in place, whether it's changing your skills, upping your skills, or helping you find something different. You have to have that transparency and you have to have that support, because the reality is you need those people to train your AI. So if they run out the door the minute that they learn that you're on an AI journey, well, you've just lost the ability to actually make your AI effective in a lot of cases. So you have to have these types of behavioral change management processes in place to make it work.
Does this mean, though, that you need to almost reprofile your own staff to know that they've got maybe that, as Steve Hill puts it, that sort of insecure innovation capability, where you need people who are a little insecure, a little fear, so they want to change, they constantly strive. Does that mean you need to kind of reprofile your whole team and figure out who's got what it takes to move things forward?
I think you do need to profile your team in a new way. You need to look at them a little bit differently. You need to think about it not just from what are they doing today and are they getting their job done, but how am I going to push, change, transition, and transform them while I'm transforming the business.
Good.
Phil, if I may add to that, so Peter showed an interesting chart this morning that showed technology growing exponentially, but somehow the human-driven organization growing linearly, right? I would argue that probably 95% plus of the people in this room work for organizations whose revenue is directly linearly tied to headcount. So why is it that when technology is going at an exponential rate, why are we not able to create that nonlinearity, right? And that only comes if we start to think about how do we marry the technology, reprofile the people, and create new leverage models. So I think, rather than having a conversation about are people going to be losing jobs, as enterprise leaders, we should be asking the question, are we leveraging our people the right way to create that nonlinear revenue growth? Because I think we're still in the 100-year-old business model of, I need to, my output is X and I need bodies in the room, right, to kind of deliver that output. Where we are now is probably for the first time we have the ability to marry man and machine, very much like, the assembly line when the first Model T came out, right? Yeah. I mean, that was that big man-machine combination process, right, where we could create that nonlinearity. I think we have an opportunity to do that with our workforce as well, right? How do you create new leverage models, reprofile them, augment their capabilities with machines, and start thinking about new business models?
Thank you. So in the interest of time, then, I just want to have a very quick, if you had to put your hand on your heart and say where this is all going, what's the one thing that really springs to mind that we may be talking about in another 2 years when we sit in these lovely leather chairs? Well, maybe we'll start with you, Traci.
I got to go first.
Or one thing.
2 years from now, I think we'll be talking about how far we've come in putting the use of AI into the hands of people that are not data scientists. I think we'll be talking about how far we've come in democratization.
Yeah. I mean, we barely talked about RPA all day, haven't we? We're talking about AI all day, which is interesting. So Ganesh, one thing we'll be talking about.
I think one thing in 2 years we won't be talking about is AI, because my hope and goal is it'll become so pervasive that you don't have to talk about it as a piece of technology, right? Now, that said, the reality is there's a big chasm in AI wherein you have a lot of work being done in silos and in labs as small projects and POCs. And unlocking the value of the true technology is going to be about integrating data, the talent, getting everybody in the organization all come together to go do it, and then doing it at scale. So hopefully in the next few years, we should see the scale journey that enterprises can go with powerful technologies like AI already underway, that we don't really have to talk about it or have a panel about it, right?
Space colonies, that's what we'll have a
Space colonies too, all for it.
I agree. I think scale will be at a greater scale at that point. I think we'll be talking less about the use cases and art of the possible and more around, again, I'm biased, but governance, ethics, control, trust, right? Those concepts, and how do you kind of demonstrate that throughout?
I agree with Martin. I think 2 years from now, we will be talking about a series of lawsuits that forced AI to stop, step back, take a look at how it's actually governed and scaled within the enterprise. I think we're only a couple of lawsuits away from somebody asking the question, how can you depend on a machine learning algorithm to determine how I got promoted versus the other one not? It only takes a few of these incidents. I think all the exuberance we have about the ability to build AI is going to be tempered in 2 years from real serious business questions on how do we scale this.
And you know what the funny part is? It's going to be probably a robotic lawyer defending you in court on that.
Highly possible.
In 3 years, maybe.
Highly possible.
Yeah, probably cheaper than the one we've got right now. Wonderful. So we did it. We're only about a minute over. So Traci, Ganesh, Martin, Vinodh. Well, what a great conversation. Really enjoyed it.